Buonasera. Benvenuti alla Casa Italiana, zerilli-marimò at New York University. Welcome to Casa Italiana. I'm delighted to see so many people love gardens and nature in a crazy city like New York. And I'm delighted especially because for us it's a special evening for several reasons. And I'm going to try to be brief, but to tell them all. The first reason is that, as you know, we have a beautiful, if small, garden upstairs. It's Sarah's garden. And Sarah's garden takes the name of Sarah Kaltman. And it was thanks to the generosity of Dr. Kaltman and of his wife, Bunny Grossinger, who is here, that wanted to remember, please, that wanted to remember Sarah, who was an architect and a landscape architect, with a garden. And I think it's a beautiful way to remember somebody with a living memory. And the place could not be more used by our students having lunch. Classes take place there, and as you know, we use it for our receptions and simply to hang out there when the weather permits it. I'm the luckiest of all because my office door opens on the garden. So in days like this, I leave the door open and have the impression of working in a garden. Dr. Kaltman, who was a brilliant cardiologist, a graduate of New York University, and a cardiologist at the NYU Medical Center, died very recently. And so for us, this evening is also a way to celebrate his life, his kindness, his wonderful manners with anybody he met, and the gift that he gave to us through Bunny, who is still with us. And she supports us, she helps us, and just her very presence is an inspiration. Please give her another round of applause. And as you know, the evening is divided into two parts. The first part, we're going to have the pleasure of listening to a lecture by Jonathan Fargion, and then there is going to be enjoying the garden. Because first you talk about the gardens, and then you enjoy the garden that you have at your disposal. So let me just tell you something to introduce Jonathan. Jonathan is a landscape designer. He grew up in Milan. He received his master's in environmental architecture from the Polytechnic of Milan, with a thesis on the history of architectural representation in Disney animation. So he's an Italian architect with the thesis on the representation of nature in Disney. He had to end up in America, and that's where he is right now. And we are fortunate that Jonathan, after studying further and after having decided that really, even if he's an architect, concrete is not his favorite subject matter, but plants and nature are. Further, he studies studying horticulture at the New York Botanical Garden. And right now, he works for Reese Roberts and Partners, and he practiced especially in architectural background and horticulture. Among other projects that he followed with the firm with which he is, he worked on the Dolce Gabbana courtyard in St. Bart's and the gardens of the Jaffa Hotel in Israel. Jonathan Fargion also writes for iitaly.org about sustainable landscape design, and this helps me to introduce the other important part of this evening. Immediately after the lecture, we're going to have a party upstairs, and we're going to introduce you some of the chefs that cooked for us. And these happen thanks to not only our friends, but our partners in adventures and crimes of iItaly. Some of you might not know what iItaly is. I-Italy. I-Italy is a platform that is available on 3 different formats. They have a wonderful website, bilingual, about anything Italian or remotely Italian. They have a TV program that airs on NYC Live, channel 25, I think, in New York. And they have a printed magazine that comes out every 2 months, roughly. Instead of having 250 editors and writers, it's basically the effort of one very thin woman that is right there, who is Letizia Airos, and of a group of very, very, very talented young people that she brings together, to whom she teaches the introduction to journalism, to writing, video making. So it's a great experience for the young people that work with her to learn all these different skills. I say partners because we do a lot of projects together in terms of videos, articles, and I really invite you to take a look at the website to start, so you have a sense of the broad variety of interests that they cover. I'm sure you're going to find something that is of interest to you. Stay with us, because immediately after Jonathan Fargion's lecture, Letizia is going to come up to the stage, greet you, introduce you to the chefs, and invite us to go upstairs to enjoy the garden and the party. Enjoy the evening. I'm, again, very, very grateful for your presence. Please welcome Jonathan Fargion.
Thank you so much. I am so excited and so delighted to be here tonight. Thank you so much, Stefano, for your introduction, and thank you, Letizia, for making this happen tonight. And I'm very happy that so many people showed up for such an exciting topic tonight. So since it's the first lecture about the garden series that probably is going to happen in La Casa Italiana, I just wanted to show and talk about the concept of landscape design and the concept of gardens throughout the evolution of Homo sapiens, or humanity, how you want to call it. So I'm going to briefly talk about how landscape design and gardens have shaped the world in different ways, and how it brought us different things. For example, sustenance, so food for ourselves, which it's basically agriculture. And then ritual gardens that were created for religious purposes. And then moving on, we're going to talk about the pleasure gardens that were created for the elites and the people in power through human history. And then hopefully we'll get to the ecology part, which is particularly my favorite portion, as I am an environmentalist and I really care about nature and the connection between gardens and environment. So let's start with a simple definition. What is landscape design? So landscape design is a practice that uses technology and art to modify and alter the nature that surrounds us. It can be done responsibly and can create spectacular results, but it can also become a very dangerous practice. Through landscape, people have revealed a great deal about our values and our culture. And garden history reveals a lot about ourselves and the culture that we lived. And it really represents the relationship between people and place. So let's go back in time quite a bit, almost 35,000 years ago. This is just a small image. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but in order to do that, I would like to start and use the help of Yuval Harari. I don't know if many of you had the opportunity to read this book. It's an incredible, interesting book that talks about the evolution of man in such a very direct way. It's not complicated. It's very easy to understand. And I think it's very important to understand where we come from in order to live the present in a more responsible way, and also tackle the future, preventing from doing the mistakes that we have done in the past. So Yuval Harari tells us that when we were hunter-gatherers before the agricultural revolution, which happened in 10,000 BC, he said that we were the healthiest, the smartest, and the happiest we have ever been. And he tells us why. So the healthiest is because we had a very diversified diet. We didn't have agriculture, so we had to wander around and collect the fruits, and the nature that was around us was the resource of our food. So we had a very diverse diet compared to the diet that we have today. And because we were nomads, we had to wander around in a very small group of people. So that also prevented the spread of diseases. And then he says that we were the smartest because we were very, very aware of our environment. And so we had a different understanding of nature around us. And then finally, we were the happiest because we had much more time for leisure. And it's not like today where we need to work 40 hours a day and then come to listen for a lecture on gardens. But TGIF, today's Friday, so just a more hour for me to work, and then hopefully I can enjoy also you guys with the with the party later on. So what happened 10,000 years ago? We had what it's called the agricultural revolution. I consider the agricultural revolution the very first example of landscape design. We modified the land with the intent of creating food and sustain our life. And with the agricultural revolution, Homo sapiens starts to settle down. It's not a nomad anymore. It settles down in one location in order to attend the land and start living within a nucleus made out of a larger group of people. And this, in the next millennia, will basically develop into the formation of society that led to our contemporary city. So I wanted to show this image because I think it's a beautiful, poetic image. This is Agnes Deans, and she's floating above this wheat field. And it's an art installation that happened here in New York in 1984. And I think it's beautiful how it talks about the direct effect of the agricultural revolution. And indeed, you can see right above her, there is New York City, one of the most successful mega city of today's world. So you can see this direct, connection between agricultural revolution and today's society. This image represents the Sade fields that are in Ireland. They were built in 3500 BC, so over 5,000 years ago. And it contains the oldest known fields system in the world, where we can clearly see from this satellite image how, first of all, the extension of the site, but also how people divided the land and organized it in a way that was practical for agriculture and obviously for the production of food. These are some of the boulders that were used to create those limits and those squares. So in a way, it's kind of like what you see when you land down with an airplane today, basically everywhere. So instead of seeing wild nature, you see fields of agriculture. This is Banawe rice terraces. It's in Asia. And I wanted to show you this image because it just showed the impact of agriculture in an even larger scale and even on a 3D way, in a three-dimensional way. You see how they modify the profile of the hills to create these flat surfaces in order to create this rice platforms. And it's interesting to see how on the other side of the world, in Machu Picchu in Peru, they were utilizing the same way to grow their food in a different way, but still it's the same concept. I think those are really astonishing images, very beautiful. And finally, just an aerial view of the scale of this of what we're doing with the land that we have and in order to produce food. So with society, we also have, with the rise of society, we also have the rise of something else. Something that we can call religions, and they believe in cosmic and divine powers. The very first garden we created were to celebrate the divine and the cosmos, mainly with propitious goals. So we wanted to get favorable water condition, fertile soil, warmth, and favorable climate conditions. So this here in this image, you see what is called the Uffington White Horse, and it's been done in England. And they scored the land, and they filled up the gaps with white chalks. I think it's a beautiful poetic image, and it's just astonishing to me. And just a small little parenthesis to make you understand the scale of this design application. During Second World War, the British had to cover this up so that the German couldn't have a geographical reference point. With permanent settlement, we also have what we can call the fixed burial sites. So it's the first time that we're basically staying in one location. So then, what we do with the people that die, we have to celebrate them. And this is the first time that we actually are doing this. And this is Belas Nap. It's in England, and it's 3,000 years old. And it's almost contemporary to what was going on in Egypt. And we all know very well how the Egyptians were the masters of this type of monuments. So humans expressed in landscape terms their connection with spiritual forces, invoking the aid of cosmic powers, and the landscape became a stage set for ritual performances to connect with the gods above. So it's kind of like almost, oh, the gods are above, and we're going to use the land in order for them to read and see what we can transmit to them. Stonehenge, it's a very famous monument that we all know very well, and we've seen pictures of it. We've seen pictures of it so many times, and tonight I just wanted to use a different image. This is a Stonehenge Free Festival that happened in 1984, and it's just interesting to me how this site, that it's so old, it's still used today in a contemporary world, and people are still gathering around and celebrating life or whatever it is. So it's just really incredible to see how it perpetuated during history. So let's move on with the pleasure gardens. So as the food production became more stable and humans had a sound source of sustenance, society grew. Along with the rise of religion, we also have the rise of the stratification of society that led to the privatization and claiming a portion of land. This graphic represents a different style of gardens represented from above, so it's a plan view. And you can just see how the style of garden didn't really change so much throughout history. We start from here, where we are about the time of the Egyptian, and then going forward, we go to the early Baroque. So you can see how the structure of the gardens, it's always represented as an enclosed space, and there is a very defined there is a very defined limit between what is outside and in the wild world and what's inside, what we are actually controlling. So what is a garden? It's a portion of land that is enclosed by walls. It's separated from the rest of the surrounding naturescape. And it's also considered as one example of land fragmentation after agriculture. Land fragmentation is it's a concept that I'm not sure that I will be able to go over with you tonight because there's so much to talk about, but let's keep it in mind and maybe we'll touch later on that. So you can see how, so aristocracy were the only one at that time that were able to have a garden, and it's just a way for them to express their power, just like architecture. It's basically the same concept. You'll see how, and we'll talk about later too, how after the Industrial Revolution, you see how the limit between the garden and the wilderness starts to blur. You can see how here we have a very defined garden, and then after the Industrial Revolution, things are starting to blur, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. So if you don't mind, I just want to go over a few of the gardens that were represented in this scheme. And we can start with the Egyptian. This is one of the oldest representation of a garden, and it's in the tomb of Nebanum. It's in the 1300 BC. You can see very clearly how it's, again, a closed court. It has some water feature in the middle. It has some animals, some water plants, and fruit and shade trees like date palms right here. And to me, it's just a beautiful image, and it's incredibly contemporary. I mean, this garden can just be something that we design today. Moving on with the Roman gardens, they were also represented, were typically in an enclosed environment. And this is what it's called in Pompeii, it's the Versailles garden. Moving on historically, we move with the Islamic Gardens, and that had a very typical structure that it's divided into 4 squares. And this is because it takes inspiration from the Quran, and it represents the 4 gardens of the Quran. And this particular garden, it's called Palais El Badi in Morocco. What is also interesting to notice is that the word paradise comes from the Persian word paridesa, which means walled and closed garden. And it also comes from the Hebrew word pardes, which means orchard. So maybe in a subconscious way, gardens really represent paradise on earth for us. At least for me, that's for sure. Moving on, also in the medieval garden, we have an enclosed garden that it's typically inserted in a bigger architectural structure that could be a castle or a cloister or a monastery. If you didn't have the chance, I would really recommend to go and visit the cloister here in New York City in northern Manhattan. It's part of the Metropolitan Museum. They are really astonishing. Moving on with the Renaissance garden. This is the Castel Gandolfo outside of Rome. It was the Pope summer residence. It is actually still today. And it's called the Giardino dei Barberini, which was a very prominent family in Rome, and they were also part of one of them was actually a pope. So in the Renaissance period, the gardens were a medium, again, for the aristocracy to communicate their power, and applying a great rigor to the nature to bend under human control. It was the apex of humanism. As you can see here, you can notice how this garden is basically monotone. There's green, there's no flowers, nothing. But there is a misconception on that the Renaissance gardens were flowerless garden, but that's not true. That's not the case. They actually had a lot of flowering species. When I was doing my research, I was trying to understand and try to find a plant list, but I wasn't able to do that. And then I realized that the binomial nomenclature of plants, which is the way we identify plants and it's the way we classify plants, was done by a very important botanist called Carl Linnaeus, but he came in history only after 1777. So I made this connection where I was really frustrated. I was trying to find a plant list, but I couldn't. Maybe my research wasn't even that thorough, but still, I think that it's very interesting to just show also this back part of gardens with Carl Linnaeus. It's just very fun to be a landscape designer because it really is a work of art that combines culture and science. I want to connect this image with the fact that I just talked about the Barberini Gardens. So I don't know if many of you knows the Barberini had as a symbol 3 bees. And if you visit Rome, if you pay attention to details, you can really notice how around you there are so many bees. It's true, it's very cute. So 3 bees are the symbol of the Barberini family. The church was often seen as a beehive, a community in which believers were little laborious and devoted bees, and honey was a metaphor of the sweetness of the divine word. But at that time, probably they didn't have a deeper understanding of the ecological importance of bees, as they emphasize only a portion of the extraordinary importance of bees as pollinators. But at that time, there was no conception of ecology, and they didn't have to reckon with environmental issues like we have today. So it's just very interesting to see how they were praising bees in a superficial way because they make honey, but the truth is they're much more important. They go beyond just the production of honey. Just a last image before we move on with the Industrial Revolution. This, many of you recognize this is an image of Versailles, and it's one of the finest form of gardens before the Industrial Revolution. So as I mentioned before, with the Industrial Revolution, the lines between gardens and the wild starts to blur. But why is that? There is a certain nostalgia of our rural past. And so we kind of want to feel like we're part of the environment, and the wilderness is also coming into our home. This image represents the first World Expo that happened in London. And the structure that you see here is the Crystal Palace that was designed by Joseph Paxton. and it's the quintessential image of the Industrial Revolution. So with the Industrial Revolution, we have a cultural dynamic that brought us different concepts that are democracy, rights, liberty, happiness, maybe for some, and wealth. And it's important to mention this because it tells us a lot about ourselves and the garden history. So all of these concepts that I just said before are the concept that led us to the egalitarianism. So thanks to which working people with no aristocratic origin could purchase land for the first time, and they have promoted the creation of suburbs and the pleasure gardens. So the pleasure gardens have now become broadly accessible, and it's not only under the exclusive domain of the aristocracy. This shows one of the very first suburban gardens that were created around London. I think it's just wonderful images that represent this type of world changing. So as the world becomes more and more populous, we become more and more dependent upon machine-built environment, and we want to harmonize our future with our past, enjoying the benefit of modernity with honoring our own human nature and the desire for nature that is embedded in ourselves. So since this is also part of what is my work and my job, I am a landscape designer, I just wanted to show you a few little things that I've been doing. This is just a way how we present our ideas and our gardens to our client. We show materials, and then we have some plan view of the gardens that are hand colored, just to give an idea of how the gardens work. And we typically also create some models that help to visualize in a three-dimensional way the garden. Just a few more images. This is the Jaffa Hotel that I've personally worked on with Rhys Roberts and Partners. You can see again the plan view with the colored rendered, and then we show typically some images just to give an idea of how the gardens will look like, where we're taking inspiration, what type of material we use, and again, the model. So here you'll see the direct change from the model to the reality. This is a beautiful hotel, and it used to be a French hospital. Here, I'm just going to talk a little bit about this garden. We used lemon espalier on the top, on the roof. And espalier actually is a term that comes from Italian, means spaliera. And it's a way of how you can grow plants. And you can basically train them to be flat. Even though they're big trees, they can just grow flat against a wall. So we use that on the top floor. And then going down into the lower floors, you can see in the loggia, we use other citrus specimen. And then the main courtyard. This is the pool area where we wanted to extend the expression of the vertical wall using plants. So we use poplar trees, and it's very cute to know also that these trees have a silver color underneath the leaves. So there is kind of like a special effect with the water when you're there. You just see like this leaf moving with the wind, and also they make a sound. So it's almost like a full experience when you're there. This is the restaurant in the main courtyard. And what's really interesting to see here is the usage of this particular tree that are grown in Israel, and it's a graft, which means that you have the opportunity with plants to basically graft one species with another, as long as they're part of the same family, so they share a DNA. So in this case, this long trunk are sycamore trees, and then the top is actually a mulberry tree. It's a fruitless mulberry tree, so it doesn't stain the pavers below. And because I know it's a very big concern. And it's just also wonderful because it gives a lot of shade, and it has this very beautiful flat canopy that does exactly the work of an umbrella. And this is the main courtyard where we used native oak trees that are evergreen in Israel. So I'm moving on now on the ecological portion of tonight's lecture. I think that it's very important to emphasize the use of trees with architecture. This is the very first tree that was planted at the Bosco Verticale, the vertical forest that was built in Milan and designed by architect Stefano Boeri. But maybe the usage of tree and nature integrated with architecture is not that new. We all know about the Gardens of Babylon, but maybe not many knows about this tower in Lucca. This is the Torre Guinigi, the Guinigi Tower, and I was actually surprised when I saw this image because I've never seen it before, and it's just wonderful how even in the 1300s they already used trees. And probably in this case, they use it just for ornamental reason, and they didn't even know that that was already an ecological gesture. Those are evergreen oak trees. It's called Quercus ilex. So we all know that trees are incredibly important because we all know they absorb CO2 and they produce oxygen, but that's not it. There's much, much more to it. So if you don't mind, I would like to read with you this image. So by intercepting and absorbing rain, they reduce storm water runoff. They absorb and store carbon dioxide, just like I said. And by creating shade for buildings, they can reduce energy demand, which also reduces waste heat from air conditioners. They can help clean the air by taking in air pollutants, so they don't absorb only CO2, they absorb also other harmful gas that are in the atmosphere. And in a very cool process called evapotranspiration, trees take up water from the ground and then they release it through the surface of the leaves, cooling the surrounding air. So if you happen to, for example, walk around Central Park in a very hot summer day, you immediately notice how if you go closer to the park, the air starts cooling down. And they also, obviously, blocking the sunlight, they help to keep the ground below cool. So it's much better to stand under a tree than, on a concrete curb. Scary image, but not so scary. Militaries all over the world are actually utilizing military forces to plant a huge amount of trees in order to fight back the environmental issues that we are having today. China, Australia, and many other countries are planting trees to fight climate change. And I think I just read an article where in India, 1.5 million volunteers planted in just 12 hours 66 million trees. So it's a little bit of a it's like, okay, so maybe we're not that desperate here. We can still do something, and I encourage everybody to please do something in order to, take responsibilities. Trees can, they're beautiful and they do all the cool things that I just said, but they also help the environment in other ways. For example, they can help pollinators. We all know the crisis with the bees, and trees, since they have flowers, they provide food for pollinators. So this is just a brief scheme of how, what type of trees, native trees in New York we can use. For example, crab-apples, flowering dogwoods, Cercis canadensis, which it's the red eastern bat, this one, and staghorn sumac. This is just a small portion. There's so many other trees that we can use, and they can be beautiful and they can help pollinators. So as I mentioned before, bees are not only important because they create honey, but they are very important because they fertilize the flowers, and hence they basically produce the main source of food that we use today. This is just a small portion of the products that they help to produce. So there is a crisis in bees population. I hope that you guys are aware of that. One of the reasons of this decline is the usage of land. And in this image, I'm showing how we are using our agriculture, and we're kind of like abusing the land because we're wiping down the land, and we're taking out the opportunity for other species to grow, like flowering species, and we're planting this monoculture of wheat and corn, which is probably our favorite. So what's the problem with that? The problem is that the flower that these type of plants produce, doesn't have nectar. They don't need a pollinator in order to spread their seeds. What they need is wind. So they're completely useless for pollinators. So that's one of the main reasons that pollinators today are declining and probably very unhappy. But there's hope. There is a study that shows that actually bees are very, very happy in urban environments. This is because in the city you don't have the application of pesticides. Otherwise, we'll be all dead. And the temperatures are higher, so they have more opportunities to survive during the winter time, which is their most crucial time of their life cycle. So you can see from this scheme how urban survivor in urban beekeeping is 62.5%, and it's higher by 20% than the rural beekeeping. And also, well, that's another parenthesis, the honey yield is also higher in urban environment. So what's happening around the world? For example, in Oslo, in Europe, they are creating what it's called the bee highways, which is it's a network of gardens that are spread all around the city that provide food for the bees and for pollinators all around the year, and they are creating these beehives that are installed on top of rooftops. So it's kind of like, in a way, we are creating virtual bridges that are connecting different gardens all around the city in this case, and kind of like jump over what we created as a land fragmentation, that are cities, that are agriculture fields, and all those things that we have done to the land. Another way to help bees in our gardens is to, instead of having grass lawn, we can have a beautiful carpet of different species of flowers that really needs much less attention than grass. This, for example, doesn't need any type of fertilizer and doesn't need to be mowed. So, I mean, to me, it's just like it goes with it. Like, why would I even want to have grass in my garden when I can have something as beautiful as this? This has been developed by a university in UK, but again, maybe if we look back in history, this concept is not that modern and contemporary. But looking at l'Annunciazione di Fra Giovanni da Fiesole from 1435, and we zoom in, we can see how they didn't have a lawn made out of grass. They had beautiful flowers. In a much larger scale, in order to tackle and fight against the land fragmentation, there are different ways that we can help the wildlife to reconnect with what happened with our anthropic intervention. So here you can see clearly what is land fragmentation. So these two portions of land, they were probably one unique piece of land, and because of a highway, they were separated. So the life and the animals that were located in one portion of this land have limited availability to get the resources that are on the other side of this highway. And not only that, not only food, but also from a DNA point of view, they cannot mate with the animals that are on the other side. So there is a detrimental effect on their DNA pool. So what we can do with landscape design in a smart way is to connect these two worlds that once were together by designing and installing these green ecological bridges that I think they're very beautiful.
Where is that?
They're scattered all over the world. This particular one is in Singapore. We have actually some also in New Jersey. When you drive in the highway, you pay attention, you'll see there is a bridge and it's like full with plants. If you pay attention, you'll notice them. In an even larger scale, in Europe, we have what it's called the Green Great Belt, and it's a strip of land that is protected by the law and runs from, you can see from that small little map, it runs from North Europe to South of Europe, and it's just a way to just protect the wildlife and have a corridor for animals and different type of species to move along Europe without encountering humans. So yeah. So this is just the last image, and I just want to tell you guys that I feel like we're living in a world where the main concept is ecology, but we are not on top of anybody else. We are just part of a system where everybody is just as important, and we need to respect that, and we need to really start to have a consciousness about this. And this is just my final thoughts. I hope you enjoyed. There is a small video that I prepared where I would like to bombard you with beautiful images of gardens, since this is the opening of the garden lecture series, and hopefully we'll see you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for this inspiring lecture. And I love that you send us messages of caution, and you always manage to put a sign of hope for the future. Because normally when you get to listen to environmentally related lectures, you leave with a cloud of doom and gloom on your head, and you feel there is nothing you can do. No, adopt bees, plant a tree, do something. So thank you not only for the accuracy and the professionalism with which you address these issues, but also for sending us to our own garden, Sarah's garden upstairs, with a bit of hope. And as I mentioned before we go upstairs, I would like to invite my friend and colleague Letizia Airos to come to the stage. As I told you, she's the founder and managing editor of Italy, the triple platform, internet, TV program, and magazine. I also advertise her because she talks a lot about Casa Italiana in all these three things, so that's good for us. And Letizia is also going to introduce her special guest that I've worked all afternoon to make our evening really perfect. Please welcome Letizia Airos.
Thank you, Stefano. You are an incredible friend, and hello, my friend. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and wow, thank you for being here. Welcome on, I have to talk about myself, first of all. On behalf of Italy, the larger network for Italian storytelling in America. So, after this incredible presentation, we are going to celebrate together with Casa Italiana. And I think we are all we need. Friends, fun, and food.
Hello.
Of course. And for the food, let me thank Associazione Italiana,
Associazione
Italiana Chef of New York, that I have the honor to introduce here. Unfortunately, without the president, but okay. Yes. Okay, and I was waiting for the pizza man, for Roberto Caporuscio, but he's stuck in the traffic. But we have pizza and mozzarella. Don't worry. So just to say, I would like to say hello to Angelo Sezza. Joseph Keller. And my friend Rosanna Di Michele from Abruzzo in Italy.
Hello, everybody.
I love her because she's from the...
I came from the same city
of my father.
Of Letizia father, Vasto. Anyway, Associazione Italiana Chef in New York, the president is Michele Mazza and the vice president is Raffaele Solinas. Tonight is busy, Raffaele in the Maiella restaurant and Michele Mazza in Munich.
Brava.
And we are a very nice association. We are very proud because we have very passion, love, we have available when some people ask, for example, Letizia, we organize maybe special party? Absolutely. Who are available? Tonight we are available 3 people and absolutely
no,
come.
we will
But,
for sure we will have a Caporuscio,
Roberto
Roberto is coming, will make a mozzarella live for us. So
Absolutely.
and with a lot of pizza too. So
we make a pasta tonight.
So,
special pasta.
Thank you. I know it's very crowded here, so please be patient because for sure we are going to have a lot of fun.
We go upstairs.
Upstairs, yes. You are so many, but it's okay.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Stefano Albertini. Thank you, Letizia. Bye. Bye. Bye.